Greetings, everyone, and salutations. Anthony Marsh on Power Rangers Lost Galaxy fan film with a new episode of the Terra Adventure podcast with podcast episode 341, presented by my Morphin Megaverse Power Rangers Facebook group. And also, happy International Women's Day to all the women of the Power Rangers fandom at the time of this recording, March the 8th of 2022. So, with that out of the way, to all the pretty and most powerful and badass women that, brought forth lots of great joy to us men out there in the world and whatnot. So, speaking of powerful and badass women, especially like a certain space pirate who wanted to take down a team of Rangers in a movie then season, 2022 is the 25th anniversary of Power Rangers Turbo. And I thought, okay, due to the fact that it's been 25 years since Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, I thought it would be a great time to talk about the film, even if it will be weeks before the anniversary of the movie's release, which was originally March the 28th of 1997 when the movie was originally released. Because, okay, Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, is that one Power Rangers movie I hardly ever talk about. I mean, of the two Power Ranger movies sandwiched in between the original 1995 and the 2017 films, Turbo is that one Power Rangers movie we just don't talk about. It was probably because of how, it was embarrassing at times. The movie was, one of the few positives that's glaring about the movie is that it was more unlike the first Power Rangers movie, it was more in line with the TV show continuity in terms of its scope and everything. But all this movie was just basically a 1 hour 30-minute cinematic version of the TV show, or an episode of the TV show for that long length, but on a bigger budget and a larger scope than the first movie was. Because when Fox did the first Power Rangers movie, that movie was really all them. This movie, by contrast, is more Saban than it was Fox. Fox, now known as 20th Century Studios as of 2022, given that Disney bought Fox recently. Fox just only distributed the film, but Saban's production team, mostly Shuki Levy, was more involved with the production of this film. And while you had David Winning, who was known for doing a lot of science fiction and fantasy fare from the 80s and 90s, including Turbo, Power Rangers movie, to be involved in this pack. And with all the other factoids that I actually found interesting about the film. It was just this one Power Rangers movie that I personally have not talked about in decades after this movie came out. And for someone who grew up on Power Rangers during the Mighty Morphin days at a really young age of 2, 3, something like that, back in 94, 95. Personally for me, folks, I mind Power Rangers Turbo when I was a little younger because it made sense. I was 4.5 going on 5 years old in 1997, 25 years ago when the season came out. And it made sense for the season to appeal to me when I was that younger. But now when I think about looking back on the season, as I got older, there is a love and hate relationship I have with Turbo. Not just the show, but the movie that set up the season. But the movie, though, I haven't seen Turbo Power Rangers movie in so long. I mean, there have been only a few times in my life outside of my childhood that I ever actually saw the movie in recent, decades afterwards. I mean, there was that one time I saw it when it was on Cartoon Network sporadically at one point in 2008. And back when Cartoon Network was showing some live action content while they had animated content. And not so long ago, recently last year, when I was doing a 1 month free trial with HBO Max, I found Turbo, a Power Rangers movie on HBO Max, and I'm just like, wow, look at the quality of the movie in 4K. Well, that was because, I have the Amazon Fire Stick on my PlayStation 4 to watch HBO Max, and especially with that 4K resolution. Given that the movie was shot on 35mm film stock with a little bit of whatever the film stock they use for the television show, but in a cinematic scope again, it astounded me with the quality of like the whole entire movie. While the movie's still not good story-wise, but and also everything else wise, like the visual effects being, piss poor and all because, well, Saban. Personally, I can see why this movie ended up being such a abysmal failure of a Power Rangers film. It was just a movie that nobody really cared about. Power Rangers Mania was still there in the 90s, but after Power Rangers, here's the thing. When I'll discuss tomorrow's video talking about the movie being a bust at the box office, it was 1997, and a lot of kids, well, older than me at the time, were moving on from Power Rangers and on to something like Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, the whole 9 yards, and whatever else was popular at the time. Cartoon Network stuff like Dexter's Laboratory. Powerpuff Girls didn't come around until a year later, 1998, so give it another year for that to come around. Nickelodeon, they brought back Rugrats after a 3-year hiatus, I believe, and Nicktoon shows like Rocko's Modern Life and Hey Arnold was taking Nickelodeon by storm, even some of their live-action Nickcoms like Keenan and Kel at the time. So Power Rangers was in a really rock and a hard place back in 1997. Not only that, it was also the same time Saban's other joint production that was around the zeitgeist of Power Rangers was stealing its thunder during this and the previous season's time in the spotlight on broadcast and in the ratings. Big Bad Beetleborgs. Hence why they came up with Justin Stewart, the Blue Turbo Ranger, who would replace Rocky, the second Red Mighty Morphin Ranger, and the Blue Zeo Ranger. And I'll discuss Justin a little bit in the retrospective. But it's just that, that was the zeitgeist at the time. And how I look at it, it's like, the problem with Turbo was that it was in the midst of Saban having Big Bad Beetleborgs taking Power Rangers' thunder and stealing its thunder in a way. Because, there were half of, I even watched Beetleborgs the same time as Power Ranger Zeo and Turbo. And I've collected a few handful of action figures for Beetleborgs and not so much on Beetleborgs Metallics. But I did had some McDonald's Happy Meal toys for Beetleborgs Metallics back then. I remember. But Turbo was probably that season of Power Rangers, not just the season, but even its movie. This movie actually did drove those older fans that I'm referring to that grew out of Power Rangers probably around this point or grew out of it by the time they started Zeo, even if the transition from Mighty Morphin to Zeo was very powerful, pun intended. But Turbo was a jump the shark moment for most of those older fans. But for me, who was a 4.5, 5-year-old kid at the time in 1997, I didn't care. I still kept on with Turbo, even for those out there I didn't know about when I was so little and young, grew out of Power Rangers because of some of the things we would notice what they would do going into the season. But I think the Turbo movie was the beginning of departures for certain key characters and elements we had from Mighty Morphin and Zeo, and with Turbo being the season of all these shakeups that did throw a lot of older fans off. But the movie itself, the top from the bat, they would replace Rocky with Justin. Now, the first thing to talk about with the movie, though, the reason why Rocky was not going to be the Blue Turbo Ranger as much as I wished he was, well, to be honest, though, Steve Cardenas, who played Rocky during Mighty Morphin's last 2 seasons and all of Zeo and a little bit of this and the first episode of Turbo, was moving on to, doing his martial arts dojo stuff and being a martial arts instructor. And also that would explain why he also had back, give his character some back problems and give him away an excuse to leave Power Rangers just to pursue that. But eventually Rocky would of course come back in Super Ninja Steel's Dimensions in Danger, which was the 25th anniversary of Power Rangers. So that would, give us a reason why Rocky was replaced with Justin, but not many people really liked Justin taking over the spot of the Blue Ranger. Now, as a 4-year-old, I didn't mind Justin, but I can see where, as I got older from the fandom, where the fans were coming from with the whole, why did Zordon recruit Justice Stewart, age 12? Yeah, there's your Linkara atop the fourth wall All-Star Batman and Robin review reference for you. Where Zordon would get a 12-year-old to take over Rocky, who was a teenager, by the way, to become the next Blue Ranger. Yeah, it was a little bit of a throw-off because, at the time, Saban did Beetleborgs at the time of Power Ranger Zeo and this, so it made sense that they had to do that. But again, it all backfired from the moment they included Justin. Now, Justin, to be honest, though, in the movie, he was annoying. He also got annoying in the first 19-some episodes, being a know-it-all, a little know-it-all, and which did annoy plenty of fans. But by the time TJ, Cassie, Ashley, and Carlos came along, and when they became Rangers, Justin would mellow out later on. But it's just when he was around Tommy's team, he did got annoying at times. But the other 4 Rangers, you can tell the pain in their faces. That at times that they want to be their friends, be his friend, but big brothers and sisters to him, given that his father had been doing all this job stuff and also lacking a mother in his life. So that would explain why Justin was what he was. Yeah. But even though some of us were puzzled. Why did they make him the Blue Ranger? Well, after all, I knew that seeing Justin wear a blue T-shirt and blue jeans kind of gave it away that he would become the new Blue Ranger. Because I know Blake Foster. Well, one fun fact that Blake Foster, who played Justin, the Blue Turbo Ranger, he was a Power Ranger fan from the start. He had watched MMPR and Zeo, and he always wanted to be on Power Rangers. So he finally got that big break as a child to be a Power Ranger. And we all as kids, when I see Blake Foster as Justin, even when I was 4 years old, 5 years old, and stuff like that. Well, even though, again, I was too young, I understand. Us kids back in that age or so, even for the more big kids, the 6 to 12-year-olds at the time, always wished that we always wanted to be Power Rangers. And Justin actually was, in fact, part of him was kind of like a Gary Stu to us when we were younger. And part of his character was maybe he was a embodiment of all of us who were kids back at that age that wanted to be a superhero. Why do you think Saban did Beetleborgs? Beetleborgs, it made sense to have 3 kids that were hanging out at a comic book shop and whatnot and working at a comic book shop. And then they would meet Flabber and the Hillhurst monsters, and then Flabber would use his magic to make Drew, Rollin, and Joe the Beetleborgs. It made sense in that show. But with Turbo for Power Rangers, by contrast, it didn't work. And we know that even when I have to recall from what Linkara said, that, about him being the new Blue Ranger, where new fans did found him annoying, while older fans thought the idea of having a 12, 13-year-old Ranger was kind of dumb, because it kind of threw it away a little bit. I don't know, has time really did pass after Zeo's ending? Let's say 6 months after Zeo concluded even, or 5 months after. But it hasn't been that long, or has it? But, we never know. So enough about Justin, though. I'll talk a little bit more about him in my retrospective on the season next month, though. But I do want to talk about other aspects of the film that a lot of people never did liked. Let's talk about Larigo. Obviously, Larigo, the only reason I would give my explanation as to why they created his character, thinking he was supposed to be this great wizard with all this magical power, was obviously, you know, in Car Ranger or Gekusu Sentai Car Ranger, Dapu was someone who gave the 5 remaining would-be Rangers the car magic to become the Car Rangers. That would probably explain it, but Larigo would not give Tommy and them the turbo powers. Zordon and Alpha gave them the powers. After all, even though we learned back in Ninja Quest in Season 3 of Mighty Morphin that, Zordon and Alpha didn't create the power coins or the Mighty Morphin powers. They found the coins. Ninjor was the one that made the power coins. So was Larigo, if Larigo was done differently, if you're going to pay an homage to his, to Car Ranger with Dapu, with the car magic thing, common sense, they probably should have had Larigo be the one that created the Turbo Ranger powers or something. I don't know. Kind of like, getting Car Ranger with the car magic stuff. No lie. But, and even with the theory, again, tying back to what we've speculated for 25 years now in 2022, that, for years, even before the point of the anniversary of Power Rangers Turbo this year, and even the last anniversary back in 2017, the 20th, that we've always speculated whether if Billy did create the turbo powers behind the scene, because that would probably explain why Billy, when you go back to, like, let's say the second half of Zeo, right around a few episodes away from, or right around during the Gold Ranger stuff, and after the Gold Ranger was introduced with the Triforians, and then Jason's return as taking over the Gold Ranger powers for the rest of the season, it would likely explain Billy's on again, off again, absences during Zeo. And while the Rangers were facing the Machine Empire, Billy probably did create the turbo powers off screen secretly. Maybe the turbo powers was probably something that Billy was thinking about in case of the Zeo powers get too strong for the Rangers' individual physiologies or so. I know that's a little overthinking it, but the actual series didn't want to confirm it, nor did, I don't think, any of the showrunners of Power Rangers wanted to confirm it. But not only that, at that time, during Zeo, and even when Zeo was produced and when it was filmed, David Yost had left Power Rangers during filming of Zeo, or close to the end of filming the season, because back in those days of Power Rangers, when a season of the show is filmed, they usually film the shows around like September or November all the way until July. So sometime between the summer months of the show's production, David had probably left the show during that time, because Zeo had 50 episodes under its belt. So when Zeo went on hiatus with the episode when they got the Red Battle Zord and the Zeo Megazord trying to do the Zeo Battle Zord combination, and when Tommy would give the arrowhead to King Mondo in that cliffhanger mid-season cliffhanger. And during the summer months when they were still filming those episodes for the second half, David probably already left the series around July of 1996, which was right around the time Zeo was wrapping up production, and would give Saban and them more time to do pre-production and development on the next Power Rangers, which they kept as a long surprise of what the next Power Rangers would be. And so that would probably explain why. And even when we watched those episodes as they aired naturally without any internet spoilers and stuff, Billy left, and again, he got recast in the last minute with an older actor, unknown actor, by the way, senior citizen. He's probably dead now. But, yeah, and then it just raised too many questions. Taking a Batman Forever Bruce Wayne reference to, I just made a Batman Forever reference right there with the whole, it just raises too many questions. But again, with Larigo, though, I can see, Larigo just felt very pathetic, in my opinion, how he doesn't really do anything. And also, every time I look at Larigo, he looks like a Jim Henson Creature Shop reject, but on a Saban Entertainment type budget. He kind of does. And every time I look at him, he looks like he is dehydrated, or he looks like he has been starving for hunger, has been running away from Divatox's forces for a while, which we didn't know. And I'll give the movie this, though, that Larigo's home planet, especially even when you go to the first 5 minutes of the movie, that when I looked at the exterior of his home planet of Laria, it looked a little too similar to the exteriors for Miranoi in Lost Galaxy 2 years later. As a matter of fact, the Laria and Miranoi both have, the same planet exterior, but, Miranoi has like white clouds surrounding the green planet and stuff, while Laria was just all green and whatnot. And Larigo has a wife and a baby that was also kidnapped by Divatox's forces, as we know in the film. And Larigo, he seemed it like he was an overall puppet character MacGuffin, but he never really served much of a purpose besides, Divatox wants Larigo and his family, and then take his power so she can do whatever with his magic, and that's what they intended. And then not only that, that's about it with Larigo. He was just pathetic. He would show up in the 3-part season premiere of Power Rangers Turbo, which the movie takes place setting up for that season. But after that, Larigo would never be mentioned after part 3 of Shifting the Turbo, and because he was pathetic, he was pointless. Really pointless. There's another thing about the movie that I think a lot of people hated. I believe it would have to be the cameos for Jason and Kimberly coming back. Now, when I was 4 years old when this movie came out, and when I saw the TV spots for this movie on TV, and even when I had to wait until the movie would come out on VHS during the summer of 1997, I was really baffled that, okay, Jason was just in Zeo. He came back in Zeo to take over the Gold Ranger powers. But I guess it makes sense for Kimberly to come back because Amy Jo Johnson had a contract where she would appear in another Power Rangers film, even if it was not a Mighty Morphin-centric one. But they didn't really need Kimberly or Jason back, or maybe Jason should just come back, but Kimberly, I understand there was another factor to this from a fandom perspective that they don't want to mention the Dear John letter that was horrendous that they gave Tommy in that Snow Business 3-parter back in Zeo, because given the huge backlash from the fandom from back then and even today, so that would probably explain why Kimberly showed up. And even though it would be Amy Jo Johnson's final time on Power Rangers in person as Kimberly Hart, even if Kimberly's no longer a Power Ranger, she was, even that promise she made back in Different Shade of Pink in season 3. But although Zordon mentioned that if she ever came back, she would come back as an even more stronger Power Ranger. But that never did come out to be. So you know what happened going into the movie. So her and Jason would become sacrifices for Divatox, for Malagor, and that was it. And basically, they were wasted fan service. Basically fan waking to the Mighty Morphin fans that were phasing out of Power Rangers by this point. I get it. But I was 4 years old. I didn't give a damn if Jason and Kimberly came back just for, again, I didn't have much fan service when I was that young when they came back. But as I got older, looking back on how far we've come with Power Rangers today, like with Beast Morphers and Dino Fury and so forth today, and then look back to the Power Rangers I grew up with like this, and Zeo and Mighty Morphin and Space and them, it's like, the fan service was unneeded. That's all. But we know, as much as everybody wanted to see Kimberly again, even if she's not a Ranger no more, She was just there because, again, Amy Jo Johnson had a contract to appear in 2 or 3 Power Ranger movies if anybody from Mighty Morphin came back and, for any more movies. But by Turbo, Mighty Morphin was already off the air, and Kimberly was not going to come back as a Ranger again or so. I mean, I minded if she did, and Jason, seeing he was wearing all black because he was just the Gold Ranger for the rest of Zeo after the Trays had to pass on the Gold Ranger power until the Trays would be back in whole again, which was the story reason for Jason to return. To take over a position of a Ranger, even though he realized after it's been 2 years since Zach, and Trini were at the peace conference, he finds out that, Tommy, you're a Red Ranger now. I didn't know that. And I was red once. Well, hey, things change. We're not in Mighty Morphin no more, so. And yeah, I think a lot of people also think that one of the few positives for some fans who liked the evil Jason and Kimberly stuff, but especially how we had evil Kimberly in the film. And I know for all of the Kimberly Hart, Amy Jo Johnson fans out there in the Ranger fandom, they really actually liked the evil Kimberly stuff that we had for like 2 minutes in that little bit when they were demonically possessed, attacking Tommy and the other Rangers, and Divatox was gleefully, evilly laughing about it and really going off on that, and hoping for Malagor to be risen from the lava, the volcanic ashes that he came from and whatnot. So yeah, and personally, even from the trailers for the movie, when I hear Kimberly say pink is out, yeah, I mean, maybe this is probably another little piece of fan service to all of those who didn't like Catherine replacing Kimberly back in season 3. Yeah, I can see that, but personally, it was just stupid. To be honest, though, 25 years later, I kind of find that line pretty annoying for Kimberly to say. Yeah, just because Kimberly is the original Pink Ranger, but it feels like maybe they did it for the fans of MMPR, just to tell all those who like Catherine to fuck off because Catherine sucks. Kimberly is the OG, the queen of all Pink Rangers. Well, tell that to Jen Scotts and Time Force in a few seasons, and then we'll talk. But so I don't understand why on earth they did that. It did annoy me even when I saw the TV spots for this movie. And even when I saw the movie itself on VHS and later on now on HBO Max, DVD, Blu-ray, whatever, it still annoys me. Okay, so I do also want to talk about the negatives more, like the story. Like, the story was, like, it takes place after the events of Zeo, but there's no reference to Zeo besides, Catherine morphing into Zeo Ranger 1 briefly, going down into that riverfall when Tommy and Kat was looking for Larigo in Africa. And yeah, I just don't understand why they just like threw a bone at Zeo one last time. Maybe that was the movie's way of telling the audience, look, Zeo was great and all, but can we move on to what is our next season? Because I guess maybe that was their way of saying, well, Zeo's done. We're not going to talk about what happened to the powers. Maybe we would probably just say that, the Zeo powers were just getting too powerful for the other Rangers' physiology. So now we got to have powers that are less powerful and be more in the stance of the Mighty Morphin powers, but much weaker, I guess. And maybe that may be the case. But I know that's my stupid explanation on that. Just like it's just as stupid as everything else in this movie. But you also had the fact that, yeah, we have to go from what we had over the last 5 years at this point. Bear in mind, Turbo is Power Rangers' 5th season. But actually, if you go by MMPR years, it's really actually 4 years of Power Rangers. Because 1993 to 1997 is really 4 years. So, In Space is really the 5th year anniversary of Power Rangers. Hence why In Space, which is season 6 of Power Rangers, was intended to be the last season. But bear in mind, this is the 5th season of the show. And we're over 200 some episodes of Power Rangers at this point. And, well, Turbo Power Rangers movies episode 0, so that just is ancillary. It's just episode 0. I don't know what number designation you should give the movie. It's just episode 1.1 for Turbo, or 1.5 for Turbo. So I don't know. So I mean, the movie could have bridged the Zeo to Turbo transition better if they would have just brought up more of what they also planned with what they intended from Zeo's finale. Like, yeah, you brought Jason back, but with Kimberly. Rita and Zed had a cameo when Rita would phone call up Divatox in a scene, which didn't go nowhere. Bulk and Skull were promised to go on that top secret mission to France, which never ended up happening. Instead, you see them back as the junior police with Lieutenant Stone, and yeah, that didn't go nowhere neither. So there's a lot of stuff that this movie failed to do, and that's why this movie kind of feels very forgettable for if you're a Power Rangers fan. But for anyone not a Power Rangers fan, you're going to get really annoyed with a lot of things pretty quick. But for us who are Power Ranger fans, and like myself included, you know, you're going to get a little baffled with some things with this movie. But you can also find some good things about this film, even though the movie's still bad in terms of the story, the pacing, and some of the visual and special effects worked in this film. And I do want to talk about some of the more egregious thing, the most egregious thing that's a good thing and bad thing about the film. You know, I don't want to talk any more negatives about the film because we know the movie's bad. Like, you didn't want to explain what happened to the Zeo powers in the film, so you just go straight to the Turbo powers. You don't want to bring Rita and Zed back while Machine Empire, you know, King Mondo and them are out. Instead, you bring in Divatox as our new villain for the next season, with this movie being classified as episode 0 of Power Rangers Turbo. Larigo was useless and pointless. You could have utilized them like Dapu from Car Ranger if you wanted to, but y'all was like, fuck it. The fan wanking for Jason and Kimberly because MMPR fans, you know, especially for those kids at the time who were aging out of Power Rangers because they felt that the show was just not for them anymore as they were getting older. And there's some other factors that made the movie bad that I aforementioned. Okay, but on for the more meat, the big meat of the movie is Divatox herself. Now, to be precise, you know, it was intentional for Divatox to look the way she looked in the film. And, you know, it was a testing ground at the time. So it made sense for this movie to be a testing ground of, you know, Divatox with the boobage and stuff, you know, a la Elvira if she was a space pirate, Power Ranger villain. But, the thing was, you know, Divatox was my first female Power Ranger villain crush before Astronema and Trakina later on. But I had a crush on Divatox. I mean, yeah, Scorpina and Mighty Morphin, but Divatox was like my real first female villain crush in Power Rangers when I was young. But yeah, but I've realized that when I watched Divatox in the movie and the season and what little appearances for Divatox in space, she came off pretty annoying. Well, courtesy of Hilary Shepard doing, you know, a great job with the character and sometimes a hammy over the top bad job at it. But hey, kudos. # Viva La Diva, right? But I think I noticed another factor why they did Divatox and Rygog and Elgar the way they did in the film going into the season itself. I think this has to do with parent complaints again, because like, thinking back to this, not only because Divatox had that mass revealing pirate queen cleavage, you know, close to like, again, Elvira kind of cleavage, or something like that. But it seemed that like not only Divatox was dead sexy in the film, of course, yeah, the movie was rated PG, but it just wasn't appropriate. But I can see if Power Rangers, no, it can't be PG-13 because at that time we were not ready for a PG-13 Power Rangers back then yet until like the 2017 movie. I think there were parent complaints about the movie in terms of the villains being too evil. Man, this is harkening back to the whole parent complaints about Lord Zed being too evil and evil looking. But Divatox was evil and sexy but her, Rygog, and Elgar were too evil for the movie's own good. And I think that's why you go into the Turbo season itself, Divatox, Elgar, and Rygog, especially Elgar, they are just idiotic and completely stupid. I mean, kind of like in the level of the stupidity seen in like Beetleborgs or that Addams Family show that Saban produced. What was it? The New Addams Family or wherever the fuck it was? Yeah. And it seemed like it was like they were going with that approach. Like they wanted to make the Turbo villains that moronic. Like they were trying to be like the pirate. They were trying to be the space pirate version, the space pirate gang version of the Addams Family. Except Elgar feels like he is Pugsley and Uncle Fester rolled in one, but except he's Divatox's nephew. Divatox is like Morticia. Rygog would have been more like, I don't know, what's his name? Gomez. Yeah, Gomez. And Porto, what the fuck was... Oh, yeah, Porto wasn't in the movie. Duh. But, that's the shit I got from the Turbo villains. Like, they came straight out of a really bad, Addams Family knockoff for Power Rangers, but except the Addams Family may be gothic and macabre, but the Turbo villains, you know, Divatox, Elgar, Rygog, Porto, they were more colorful in essence with the bright colors of Turbo's aesthetics, you know, again, emulating what was in Car Ranger with that. And you know what, not only that, it was also 1997. What other major superhero movie came out, which of course is infamously one of the worst movies of all time? Batman and Robin. And No One Effect was also the year of Batman. You know, No One Effect Turbo was also in the year of the worst Batman movie ever, so it made sense. Not only that, 1997, I hate to say, you can have your Titanics and Con Airs and all them other good movies of 1997, and George of the Jungles and whatever, but Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, Batman and Robin, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, they were all film sequels to hit movies from 1995 that actually, yeah, were its sequels, were not. But I know from a casual perspective, you know, I keep hearing casuals say that Turbo Power Rangers movie is a sequel to the first Mighty Morphin movie when, well, from my Power Ranger perspective and from a Power Ranger fan consciousness, it's not a sequel to the Mighty Morphin movie, because as I learned, the first movie is not canonical to the TV show in any way, but you still had the cast from the season 2, early season 3 lineup of the cast reprising the roles in the movie, but except the characters had to be written differently for that movie's continuity, and also given their armored suits and stuff, and the CGI Zords and Ivan Ooze and whatnot. But Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, is in line with the TV show because they got the spandex, they got the guys in a rubber-suited monster and or Megazord suit on a stage, and some other factors that made it feel more like this is more close to the TV show, but except you don't need Sentai footage because, again, you don't have the rights to feature what Toei had from the Sentai in a Power Rangers film that was produced by a more bigger league, 5-decade-old at the time film studio. Okay, so there was those other factors, but yeah, I think parent complaints about Divatox and them being too evil in the movie probably is why going into the season, Divatox got really annoying, and I don't even know why the heck they swap out Hillary Shepard with Carol Hoyt, starting with the season of Turbo, but she would return with her true Divatox come the episode The Darkest Day by the time TJ and them are already Rangers after replacing Tommy and them. But I think there's some other what ifs in this movie, like what could have been, like, you know, the one what if there was one thing I would change about the movie is that this movie should have been the real passing of the torch film instead of being about the Rangers on a quest to stop Divatox from going to this mysterious island of who gives a fuck to bring Malagor to life so she could marry him. And that was another thing that bugged me. Like, doing, that was another thing with these Power Ranger movies before the 2017 film, is that they had to go on this quest to get some power or something, and that's what drags these movies down. And this is one of the reasons why I think Power Rangers over the last now 25 years hadn't had much luck with their movies. Well, again, as good as the first Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie was, Turbo, and I hate to piss off some people who are fans of the 2017 movie again, they drag on too long on when we're going to have the Power Rangers in the film. They always have to have the Rangers show up in the third act in the suits and stuff, and that's why I think this is why Power Rangers, if you're going to do a Power Rangers movie in the future, please give us more Rangers in it. You can still have your balance of character and story, but give us some fight scenes of the Rangers doing stuff in the suits. You can have like a fight scene in Act 1, a fight scene in Act 2 in the suits, a fight scene, of course, definitely in the third act, and then get the Megazord and end the movie on a good note and give us a moral lesson issue of the day in a film. And I think this movie should have been also this Passing of the Torch movie here instead of what we got in the first 19 episodes of Turbo, leading to Passing of the Torch. And, well, at that time, well, the cast of Mighty Morphin and Zeo, who would become the first gen Turbo Rangers with Justin, well, they were getting, Jason David Frank and John Yon Bosch and Catherine Sutherland and Nakia Baris, they got exhausted after doing the show for so long. Knowing the fact Catherine, JDF, and Johnny have been on the show since Mighty Morphin, Nakia was around at the end of Alien Rangers, which is still part of MMPR, but Nakia was only as Tanya for one whole season of Power Rangers. They could have still had her around for another season to flesh Tanya out. I mean, yeah. But Johnny, JDF, and Catherine have been around longer, so maybe they were the ones that were supposed to leave. But then they said, but the producers insisted in the show, screw it. We're going to replace everybody except Justin, and they did that. But I'll elaborate on that later in my retrospective for the Turbo season next month. Like I said, once again. I personally felt that they should have probably set up the graduation stuff. They should have graduated from high school in this movie, and then set up the passing of the torch. You would have Justin. If you're going to replace Rocky, why not replace Tommy, Catherine, Tanya, and Adam in this movie, then spend 19 bogus, boring, slow-paced as hell episodes of Turbo with that poorly, horrible recast of Divatox out of Carol Hoyt for those first 19 episodes with that cast. Again, they didn't think about it at the time. So they waited until once we got to the Blue Centaurian debut, and with the Millennium Message, that, they would start, red herring future Ranger replacements for Tommy, Catherine, Tanya, and Adam. And they did that. But at that time, Ashley and Carlos wasn't even brought up yet, given until the episode Drive to Win. And then Cars Attacks, which they intended to have that girl that was Lieutenant Stone's niece, Jenny Hunter, to be the Pink Turbo Ranger. Personally, also speaking of the girl who played Jenny in Cars Attack and Turbo, she kind of looked like a lookalike of Amy Jo Johnson, but a few years younger. And kind of looks more like a Jennifer Love Hewitt lookalike for a Power Ranger cast candidate. Or whatever she looked like at the time. But TJ was originally Michael, which they considered, and that would explain back in the Alarmed and Dangerous episode that Justin had to deal with those two bullies that were testing ground proxies for TJ and Carlos, but I can't imagine TJ and Carlos bullying Justin. But hey, that was in that episode. But we would have settled down with, Cassie and TJ in Passing the Torch instead. Maybe this movie should have did did all of that stuff like I mentioned instead of what we got in the film itself. So there you have it with that. Okay, before I wrap up, I don't want to go on for an hour and keep everybody up for the night, but There is a few positives for Turbo, a Power Rangers movie. There is a few positives. I'm not going to lie, folks. There is some positives of this movie. I did like that the movie actually captured the essence of the TV show more than the first movie did. Enough said. Enough said, says Stan Lee. Rest in peace, though. But one of the few things I also have to take notice when they did adapted the Car Ranger suits, aka the Turbo Ranger suits, if you look at something a little bit on the suits really quick, you don't have those arm patches from the Car Ranger, from Car Ranger, like the yield, the triangle with the yield sign. I mean, like with their designated number on the left side, and then their team logo on the right side of their arms. That was also missing. Maybe they decided, no, wait until we do the season, then do that. I do like the fact that the costumes were more vibrant in color in the movie, whereas when I look at the way how the Turbo Ranger suits are in the show, I guess maybe this is from my vision or something, that the suits, the way how the Turbo suits looked in the show in the American footage as opposed to in the Car Ranger footage, in the US footage of the suits, they looked pretty gaudy in color. Like maybe it's because given the filming equipment they had at the time in late 1996, after they wrapped filming the movie and stuff, early 97, and then by the time they started getting a new camera film stock for the latter half of Turbo, going into In Space and so forth, that the colors will be more vibrant in the later episodes of Turbo. But in the earlier episodes, and also what I've noticed about looking back on the DVDs, on the Shout Factory DVDs, especially for the first volume of Turbo episodes, the color quality on the Turbo suits in American footage looked pretty gaudy and dreary looking. Maybe it's because given the film stock they had at the time or something. Well, in some episodes it looked gaudy, especially on the coloring on the Pink Ranger suit. And personally, even though when I did watch the movie for the first time in so long, and watched it on HBO Max, I was, like I said last time, I was so astounded with that 4K high def quality of this movie. I mean, like, yeah, we didn't have this kind of quality when this movie came out in theaters for like a week, and then it left because it died at the box office. And then when I got it on VHS, I have never thought the quality for this movie would be so clear cut and sharp for my aging near 30-year-old ass to witness a Power Rangers movie in this kind of high def quality, even though the movie sucks. But that is incredible that they actually made the movie, even when I saw it on HBO Max again, and when I get the Blu-ray, the Shout Factory Blu-ray, and just look at how clear and sharp and vibrant the movie looked in that quality. It's incredible. Then you also had some other positives. I'll give the movie this. One of the few things I did like was the Malagor costume in terms of his animatronics. You know, instead of using CGI, I mean, one of the other things I do have to give Turbo credit, there was not much CGI in this film. Because if they did use CGI in this movie, boy, man, it would be like screaming MMPR 95 movie CG bad, but in 1997, or kind of like in the vein of the horrendous visual effects in Mortal Kombat Annihilation kind of bad. Whew. I mean, personally, I actually think Malagor looked a lot awesome when they were still fighting in the cave, because the way how they did those LED lights and stuff with the lava effects was impressive. Even when I was a 4.5-5-year-old kid watching the movie, you know, Malagor didn't scare me as a kid with those animatronic facial movements of him. It was impressive. It was a cool looking monster. And kudos for director David Winning for creating that guy, because, and heck, he would eventually become Dark Spectre in Power Rangers in Space. Who knew? But also, here's another negative again about that, speaking of Malagor again. But though when Malagor goes out into the sunlight, those awesome lava effects are dimmed when he goes out into the sunlight and fights the Megazord. And yeah, that's one thing I have to give the movie for that. But although I did like the Turbo Megazord, fight with Malagor, even if it didn't last that long, because the movie, again, they don't have a whole movie to dedicate, the last of the movie to dedicate the whole fight. The fight was going to be only 5 minutes or 2 minutes from what I estimated, and that was that. And then Divatox would start swearing and like, I'll, make those Power Rangers pay for destroying my would-be husband, and I will not accept defeat, and stuff like that. But, the Turbo Megazord fight with Malagor was pretty impressive. At least we don't have to use CGI, unlike the first movie, where you had to use managers and CGI robots, the CGI Zords and the CGI Ivanus to fight the Megazord, like in the first one. This movie felt more close to home with the TV show as much as possible with the aesthetics and stuff, and capturing the essence of how you would do Super Sentai in America on a film stock for Power Rangers, and that was impressive. While the Turbo Megazord fight, may have a lot to be left desired, but I still like that they actually felt more close to the show in terms of having a guy in a Megazord suit and another guy in a monster suit, which was impressive on a Power Ranger movie budget. Even if it's a cheap budget Power Ranger film, being more close to the show. Also, another positive, I'll give the movie this. I wish that, instead of using so much Sentai footage of the Rangers inside the Turbo Megazord, and also the individual Zords, what's wrong they couldn't use the cockpits of the Turbo Zords for American footage? Or is this more of a, once again, another problem with 20th Century Fox again, between Fox and Saban again, so I guess that would probably explain why they could not use the cockpits for the Zords. And, it was a shame, sadly, because I really liked the cockpits for the Turbo Zords in the movie than in the show. I mean, nothing wrong with what we had in the Sentai footage of it, or the Sentai footage of the Turbo Megazord cockpit. But I just think that it brought more originality of how you would have done Turbo much differently than what we actually got in the show. But, of course, we got Sentai footage to burn, so enough is that. But it's unfortunate we never did got to see the use of those cockpits and stuff in the show. They were interesting. Plus, I actually prefer the Turbo Megazord cockpit in the movie than in the show, because at least there's more freedom and some more space for the Rangers to operate inside the Megazord cockpit. Personally, I never was all that much of a fan of the Turbo Megazord cockpit in the show, because I just don't like it all that much. So, yeah, those are some of the things I have to bring about Turbo Power Rangers movie. And, I haven't really talked about this movie in so long. And, actually, of all the Power Ranger movies that we have so far, and no, Legendary Battle Extended and Clash of the Red Rangers don't count. They're just 2 episodes in the way of a movie, but whatever. But, yeah, Turbo Power Rangers movie, as bad as it may be, overall, I still find Turbo to be pretty much of a guilty pleasure. It's a guilty pleasure film, because, like, a guilty pleasure Power Rangers film, simply because of Divatox. But, yeah, but the problem is, like, all the things I've mentioned for the last 50 minutes, if they had done this movie differently, which I'll elaborate in tomorrow's episode, I think, despite the movie didn't do well at the box office at all, I think a part of me just felt that Saban should have just released the film as a direct-to-video special, which can still be canon to Power Rangers, or make it as a made-for-TV movie event for Fox Kids for a Saturday morning event. Maybe they could have done that, but no, Saban had a contract with Fox to do another Power Rangers film, so they decided to put it out in theaters. But the end result was, well, I'll discuss that in tomorrow's episode of the podcast, why the movie bombed. So those are my so that's sort of my little retrospective on Turbo Power Rangers movie, because go watch it on your Blu-rays or wherever you can find it, HBO Max, wherever you can find it, and then even on Disney Plus, since Disney owns anything from Fox's library of movies now. So do you still hate this movie, or do you like this movie now than ever before, based on my opinion, or you just, feel like, the movie's still shit? Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'm off for now until the next episode tomorrow, discussing the failure of the Power Rangers Turbo movie at the box office. Anyway, be sure to subscribe, drop a like, share this video with your friends, and I'll see you guys tomorrow and next time with a brand new video.